Thank you. And welcome everybody to New York, and to AppNexus, our headquarters here in New York. Hopefully you haven't traveled too far to be here. Some of you as far as places like Midtown. And we're thrilled, absolutely, to be hosting this event here this evening. We were really honored to, thank you. We were really honored to have been included in the mayor's campaign for We Are Made in New York. As a company that has been absolutely proud of its roots in New York and has built its company right here, we thought it was just a tremendous honor and privilege to be included in the campaign. And given the rate at which we are hiring and building this company, gave us a great amount of momentum, actually, as well. So we were absolutely thrilled and started talking to Rachel Haot, the Chief Digital Officer of New York City, who, in conjunction with Mayor Bloomberg, has just made an enormous contribution to the tech sector here in New York. Their efforts and their support manifested in campaigns like the We Are Made in New York campaign, but also many other things that we'll talk about tonight, has just been a tremendous source of inspiration and support for AppNexus and for many other companies in the industry. And so we were talking about it and decided to pull together tonight as a way to talk about not just what the mayor and Rachel are up to, but also companies like AppNexus and some of the others that you'll hear about featured tonight who are building great world-class technology companies right here in the heart of New York City. It's a really exciting story. Thrilled to have you here tonight. Welcome. And I'd also like to welcome Rachel.
Thank you, Michael, for providing this phenomenal space and hosting us this evening for the discussion. It is so inspiring, as you just saw, to see all the momentum that's happening in tech in New York City. And before we welcome up our wonderful panelists, I'm going to just give a quick overview of Mayor Bloomberg's commitment to tech in New York City and what that really means for us and how we're trying to support all of that momentum further. And then we'll welcome up some really great companies that exemplify what's happening in New York City and can speak a little bit more to what it's like to be a tech startup in New York City. So Mayor Bloomberg himself, as I'm sure you all know, is a phenomenal technologist and an entrepreneur. So he knows firsthand what it's like to start a company from the ground up. He also knows what it's like to start a digital company, a data-driven company with Bloomberg LP. And he has made it a priority of his administration, of course, to continue to support the tech sector in New York City, especially as we know that it's incredibly important to the vitality of the city's economy. So this was the reasoning why he created NYC Digital, which is the office that I'm very fortunate and honored to lead and be a part of. And this is also why we decided that the first step of NYC Digital would be to create a digital roadmap that identifies the initiatives that we would take, the strategic steps to realize New York City's potential as the world's leading digital city. So there are 5 key areas, and I'll go through them really quickly so we can get to the panel. The basis is infrastructure and access. We talk constantly to entrepreneurs in New York City, and we know that first, you need to have the pipes. You need to have the infrastructure in place to have the level of productivity and efficiency that you need in your company. And this is why initiatives like micro-trenching are happening in New York City. Micro-trenching is a cutting-edge technique for wiring fiber across the city that has minimal impact on things like street closures that are not only annoying and disruptive, but very expensive, and create great opportunities for us to wire companies with fiber connectivity. We know that's something that we really want in the city. It's also why the city has done things like introduce initiatives that provide up to $7 million of completely free fiber connectivity for startups. And of course, all the initiatives that I'm talking about today are available at wearemadeinny.com. We also know that in order to have a fully connected city, we need every single resident, every single person who's living and working in New York City to be able to get online. And that's why we've connected over 300,000 low-income New Yorkers over the past 2 years, working in partnership with the federal government. And that's because we know that being able to use this technology to be able to get online, whether you're applying for a job or just learning how to use basic programs and applications, is crucial to the economy. More than 75% of employers only post jobs online. So we know that if you're not able to get online, you're at a significant disadvantage, and we want to counter that as much as possible. So the next piece up from infrastructure is education. Who here is familiar with the Cornell Technion School or has heard about it at all? Okay, so maybe about half of you. So Cornell Technion was the first school announced as part of the mayor's NYC Applied Sciences initiative. This is going to build a very exciting engineering campus on New York City's Roosevelt Island. The city put up $100 million towards this, and this is because we heard from great tech companies that they are hiring so fast and they're really looking for talent. We also know that this is a challenge that's affecting the full nation, that truly we have a great need to find the talent that we need to take our companies to the next level. And NYC Applied Sciences is one step in that direction and one part of our roadmap. And at its height, the Cornell Technion School is going to help to create another 2,000 PhD students in computer science in New York City, and that's going to really help to support the ecosystem. But we are also tackling this challenge at the high school level. So there's the Academy for Software Engineering, backed by Fred Wilson and Google and Facebook, who are all advising on the curriculum there to make sure that our young high schoolers are learning how to code in addition to the basic curriculum that is offered at the schools. So the next piece is data. We know that data is crucial to so many startups. Data-driven companies are really the backbone of a lot of what's happening in New York City's tech momentum. And we also know that the city of New York has an enormous amount of data. So we are trying, wherever possible, to open up that data. We have the most progressive open data legislation in the country. We have over 1,100 data sets available to the public. And we recently appointed the city's first chief analytics officer. And if you want to find out what they do, Google the mayor's Geek Squad, and you'll find a great piece in the New York Times about how the city is using data to save lives and do things like reduce the response time of an ambulance by a minute, simply by looking at the data and redistributing where our resources are placed. And then the next two pieces is really where our office at NYC Digital does most of our work. So engagement. How do we make sure that every digital touch point that connects you to the government is optimized as much as possible and is providing a really great user-centric experience? We know that far too often the mentality is that you have to come to us or there's a walled garden, and instead we're going to where our constituents live online. So if that's Facebook, if that's Twitter, we're going to come to you where you live online and let you do things like report a pothole or get emergency alerts. For example, something that we did a lot of during Hurricane Sandy. And we also know that we want all of our own properties to be consistent and intuitive and great experiences. So this summer, we'll be unveiling a completely brand new nyc.gov, city's website, nyc.gov, and that's something we're very excited to be working on in partnership with Huge, which is another great tech company or design company here in New York City. And finally, industry. So hopefully, if we have all of these building blocks in place, from infrastructure and education to data and engagement, we're creating a really fertile, exciting environment for entrepreneurs to come and launch their companies. And that's exactly what we're trying to do in terms of our industry initiatives within Made in New York. It's a very exciting time for tech in New York City. We are ranked #2 in the nation after Silicon Valley, and we're continuing to grow. From the years 2007 to 2011, New York City was actually the only tech sector in the world to show VC investing growth. We grew by about 32%. Everywhere else had negative growth. They were declining. And we think this really speaks to what's happening in New York City. We saw a recent report by Dice.com, which posts IT jobs, that showed there are more open IT jobs in New York City than anywhere else in the country, including Silicon Valley, including San Francisco. And that's because we have so many great industries in New York City. And as all of them become digital and evolve, we're going to see more and more tech talent being necessary, and we're just going to see that ecosystem grow even further. And this, of course, is why we launched We Are Made in New York, to first make people aware that there's so much momentum going on in the city, and also to visually express this. So if you go to the website, you'll see our jobs map. It shows the 5 boroughs, and plotted across a Google map is where all the tech companies are located. And you can filter by investors, co-working spaces, or companies that are hiring, and you can click right on the company and go straight to its jobs page. And we launched that map with about 600 companies. We thought we had covered most of the tech companies in New York City, and we opened it up to submissions from the public, and we're thrilled and also overwhelmed that over 1,500 additional companies applied over the next 2 days. So today we have more than 2,000 tech companies in New York City that are hiring, and over 1,000 of those are what we call made in New York companies. And that's a company that is 75% or more basing their development here in New York City. It's not just the marketing or media arm or the advertising sales. It's truly the engineering teams as well. And we think that this is a really important point to send home, both within the city to all New Yorkers so that they're aware of these job opportunities, but also across the country and around the world, because we want to make everyone aware that we are really flourishing here in New York City, but also that we welcome them with open arms. So the website also features a range of initiatives for anyone who wants to learn about tech, launch a company here, or find a job. And if you are a Made in New York company, much like AppNexus, you can create your own video like they did, a fantastic video. And you can find the directions for that on the website under the Participate tab. And we're continuing to add on to that and create a fun sizzle reel, as you can see, that really brings it all together. And this is something that we're just continuing to highlight to all the audiences that the mayor encounters and that we're presenting to over the coming months. And finally, we know that it's really crucial to the health overall and the vitality of New York City's tech sector that we create opportunities to increase diversity in the sector and for tech leaders to give back. So this week we launched a new volunteer tab on wearemadeinny.com. And on that tab, you'll find opportunities to give back. So whether you want to mentor a student or take on an intern from a low-income community who is interested in being more familiar with the tech world, there's a wide range of opportunities that help you to connect more deeply with New York City and help to support our health overall. So one last point of housekeeping, please feel free to tweet this using hashtag #live@AppNexus. And of course, this is a hashtag #MadeInNY event. So whatever's most appropriate for the content that you're creating. And with that, please join me in welcoming up our awesome panelists. Thanks, everyone. So we're going to start, once everyone gets settled, by just going down. And if each panelist, just so that the audience is familiar with your work, could quickly talk a little bit about here's the year, this is what we do. This is the year we were founded. This is about how many employees we have. And then we'll get settled into a pretty organic conversation about what it's like to launch in New York City, the opportunities, the advantages, and then we'll open it up for Q&A at the end. So please think of smart questions that you'll be able to ask at the end. Michael, do you want to kick it off?
Sure. I'm Michael Rubenstein, president of AppNexus. AppNexus was founded in 2007, so it's coming up on 6 years old. The company is in the business of technology for digital advertising. And so many of the ads that get seen online are bought or sold using a technology platform that we've developed. We have big customers around the world. Microsoft is a good example of a customer who sells ads using our company's software. We started the business here in New York, and it's gone from effectively zero or two founders, as you saw in the video, to 510 full-time employees today, with another 40 or so who have accepted offers, so effectively 550. We also are doing a massive intern program this year. We have another 30 summer students effectively coming in, and we have dozens of part-time employees too. Most of our employees are here, but we have around 10 offices right now around the world. Yeah.
Maybe Vincent.
Hello, my name is Vincent Polidoro. I'm the CTO and co-founder of PublicStuff. PublicStuff does service request management and local services for small and medium-sized cities. We were founded in 2010. We launched in 2011. We consist of about 22 employees right now, and we're very grateful to be here. We hope one day to also have 10 offices around the world.
Ditto.
Yes.
So hi, I'm Kathryn Minshew, the co-founder and CEO of themuse.com. Each month we help about 1 million people figure out what they want to do with their lives. So someone might come to the Muse to apply for a job, explore a photo and video hiring profile of a company, watch videos of that company's employees talking about what it's like to work there, see photos inside the offices, and just kind of get an experience of what it might be like to apply to that company before actually doing so. and we also offer a massive career and job search content arm and work with a lot of companies in New York. We were founded in, I guess, the end of 2011. So we're probably the youngest company up here. We have 11 employees right now, and we'll be 14 by the end of May. And we actually were founded in New York, left for a few months to do Y Combinator in Silicon Valley, and then made the decision to come back here, and definitely really excited to have done so.
Hi, my name is Michael Karnjanaprakorn. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Skillshare. Skillshare is an education platform for skills-based classes. So we allow anyone to teach a class. So we've had Jay-Z's photographer, an animator at Disney teach classes. And we've had students take classes in anything from design to technology to culinary to photography to writing, pretty much whatever a student wants to take. We founded the company in 2010, launched the site about 2 years ago, and we're about 13 people right now. So.
It's great, it's amazing. Really inspiring to hear about what all of you are doing. So, Kathryn, you hinted that you guys actually went back or you went to the West Coast and then you came back to New York City. I'd love to hear a little bit about, obviously Y Combinator is a fantastic program and has a great reputation, and I'd love to hear a little bit more about what that decision was like, if you encountered any pushback when you wanted to move back to New York, and how you decided to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we were accepted to Y Combinator at the end of 2011 and moved out there for the start of the program in January of 2012. And at the time, the team was 4 people, and by the time we finished Y Combinator that March, we were 6. And so we'd hired new people out on the West Coast, and we decided not to make a decision about whether we'd come back to New York or stay there until after the end of YC, so we'd had a few months. And what was interesting is, there were a lot of great things about being out in the Valley. You obviously have access to some of these huge companies. There's great engineering talent, but we missed a lot about New York. And so, some of the big things that I think drew us back, one was that for us, our business really depends on not being in a vacuum. Our customers they're definitely some tech people, there are a lot of engineers and designers on our platform, but there are also a ton of just, the type of person who would be your friend from high school, your neighbor, your cousin, and people who are in finance, international development, fashion, consulting, law. And in the Valley, it was often actually very hard for us to get the perspectives of people who were not in tech. And I think for us being back in New York, we felt like there was this real advantage to having to be able to plug into all these industries. And also, our product is used by companies like L'Oreal, I don't know, like NPR, a lot of businesses that have much more of a presence, I think, on the East Coast. And I could go on and on, I won't take over the panel, but there were a lot of reasons, and I think for us, having that diversity was one of the biggest ones.
I think that's a great one. We hear that a lot. And also, obviously, in my role with the city, a lot of what we do is, I mentioned that strategy of coming to our constituents live online. And when I talk with social media platforms, you name the social media platform, they always have the most users in New York City. Obviously, we're the biggest city in the country, et cetera. But I think New Yorkers are also sort of predisposed towards using these technologies and often being early adapters. So I'd love to hear maybe from other folks in the panel who, have you seen that is there something where there's an advantage to being closer to your users? If your users live in New York City, whether it's on sort of the supply side as your teachers, Michael, for example, or as your sort of consumers who are attending the classes. Do you see that being an advantage, or is that also existing equally in other cities?
I guess you teed me up for this one. I think when we first launched Skillshare, for the first 18 months of the business, all the classes happened in person. So one of the more famous stories around the launch of Skillshare is that we launched it for, less than $5,000. And the way we did that was we used a lot of existing tools, but part of the success of Skillshare, I think, was because we asked a lot of our friends to teach. So they were all kind of experts or well-known celebrities in their own fields. And we went to every single class. And we talked to every single user in the early days. And that's how we ended up launching the business. And if you fast forward that to last summer, a lot of what we learned of how New Yorkers like to learn wasn't the teacher in the front of the room lecturing. So we started reading through all the feedback, and that's what eventually led to us launching the online version of Skillshare, which today, over 90% of our students enroll into those classes. It was really came from like a lot of probably New York, a lot of the way New Yorkers think and a lot of the innovative thinking and creativity that comes out of this
Right,
city.
and they're not shy about sharing their feedback also is an
Yeah.
advantage. And I'll also try to say Michael K or Michael R, because we are blessed to have two Michaels on our panel. So Michael R, I guess, and also Vincent, I mean, in terms of having, whether it's partners locally in New York City nearby or users that you can observe. I mean, we were talking before that Mayor Bloomberg's a huge supporter of customer service. We don't currently use PublicStuff for our 311 systems and all of that, but we do know that it's a growing, a growing field, and it's something that we've had a lot of conversations about. I mean, how has that played into being based here in New York City?
Oh, it's been fantastic. I don't think we could have launched and had the success that we've had if we weren't here. New York is, I often think New York is either the best or the very close second best at everything that there is to do. And they really were one of the first cities to set up a very comprehensive 311 system with, an incredibly robust list of services. And we've really learned a lot from being around that and using that. And every single day you say to someone in New York City, we try to describe what it is that PublicStuff does, and having that as a point of reference is incredibly useful. It's just been very helpful being around that and learning from that and hopefully contributing to that going forward.
That's great. And so, Michael, I guess in terms of partnerships, et cetera, how is it helpful or not helpful to be in New York, and what does that look like for you guys?
Yeah, it's enormously helpful. I mean, Brian said it in the video, New York is the media capital of the world, and it's just such a tremendous asset for us to be in such close proximity to the biggest media companies, the largest advertising agencies, the biggest advertisers. It's really an amazing thing to have such easy and fantastic access. And I would say that it's been really one of the great drivers of success for us. But having said that, also, we have always done business on a global basis. And so even just having the access or the ability to get to New York and from New York to just about anywhere else in the world really quickly has been a great help to us as well. I'll give you one example. I mean, our business in Europe has been a tremendous success for us. 18 months ago, it didn't exist. And we have traveled a lot there, we've done a lot, and now it's a really big and meaningful part of our business. We've flown back and forth to Europe many times. 3 weeks ago, I was in San Francisco for an event that we hosted out there, and I had to be in Europe the following week. And I had to go from I had to go from San Francisco to Paris. And I have to tell you, I couldn't really function the next day. I mean, I don't know how any of you would be in that situation, but to me, taking an overnight flight from New York is manageable. Trying to manage a business in Europe from the West Coast of the US would just about be impossible. And so I think just being here also and having relative proximity to the West Coast of the United States, which is also a lot going on, but also Europe to us has been, a huge asset.
That's great. Oh, Kathryn looks like she's saying.
No, I just wanted to add as well, I think a couple people referenced this, but the ability to kind of get face-to-face with prospective clients, especially for an enterprise company, is also so valuable. And it's been interesting. I mean, when we were getting started, we were a small company. We didn't have a ton to offer. We definitely didn't have any funding. We were kind of starving to death. But I was able to go to events. Another founder invited me to a party that Gray Advertising was throwing. And we're standing up there on the roof right at 23rd and 5th. And he says, we're talking to some guy at Gray, and he's like, oh, it's really impossible for me to hire great people. And I'm like, well, that's really funny because that's what my company does. And 3 days later, he had put me directly in touch with the head of HR with a recommendation, like, I met this person last night, I like what she's doing, and they signed up on our platform, a week later. And I could never have gotten a company like that with a cold email, but being able to show up in person and pitch in the early days, once you've got the marquee clients, you can get people on the phone. But I think being in New York was really essential for closing the deals that gave us credibility later on.
That's great. Do you have something to add, Michael?
Just to, throw a little cold water also, there are challenges also, obviously, of being in New York. And one of the challenges is very expensive to build your business here. And one of the risks is that companies, and you see a lot of this from companies based in other places, like they'll put a small piece of the business here in New York. And I think that's why, actually, I think the investments that the mayor's office has been promoted are really smart, because it promotes actually building an entire business here in New York, which I know everyone here is doing. But there definitely are some challenges. There's, if you build your company on the West Coast, there's ready access to capital, ready access to talent, a lot cheaper from a real estate perspective and so forth. And obviously, we're all building businesses. Those are surmountable challenges. But that's.
I think that's a great point. We did a similar panel at South by Southwest, and we've heard from some startups that, did you have any pushback, for instance, from your investors when you were deciding we want to move back to the East Coast or basing AppNexus here? Did they say, well, if you really want to be serious, why don't you move this to the West Coast? How have your investors and your funders and your network supported that, or are you working with local investors, or has it changed? I think it's important to be transparent about that.
We were definitely told by one person in San Francisco, I'll fund you, but only if you stay. And it was a hard decision, but we were like, well, I'm not going to make a fundamental business decision like where I locate my company based on an investor or even a group of investors. And so it was too bad to say no to that, especially that was before the end of our round when a lot of people wanted in, and it was a time at which we were really having trouble. But I just felt like that would have been such a short-sighted decision to make.
It's interesting. Michael K., I'm interested in your view, because you've Skillshare, which is awesome, and prior to that you were at Hot Potato, which was acquired by Facebook, and prior to that Behance. So have you seen it change over time, or when you were creating Skillshare, was there any pressure, or did it not figure into it?
Yes, I moved to New York probably like 6-7 years ago, and when I first moved here, I was really, ever since I was a little kid, I was like, I'm moving to New York. And I moved here from New Orleans because I wanted to work in a tech startup. And I remember when I first got here, I would go out, the first thing everyone asks you in New York is, where do you live, what neighborhood? So they automatically judge you, and then they ask you, the follow-up question is, what do you do? So I would always say I work at a tech startup, and the follow-up question was always, okay, cool, what are you starting up? And I was like, oh. And that was like 6-7 years ago where no one knew what a tech startup was. And I would say now, it's obviously a lot more well-known, and the industry from where it even was 6 to 7 years ago is completely different. And fast forward, the more companies are successful, the more successful things will happen in the community. In regards to Skillshare, I would say, we've been New York or die ever since we started. So all of our investors are from New York. But yeah, every time I meet with an investor outside of New York, the first question they ask me is, are you guys ever going to open up a San Francisco office or something in Palo Alto, or everywhere you work, they got acquired by West Coast companies. You ever think about coming out here? So yeah, it is a question that we get asked a lot. And to be honest, we'll probably raise money from or partner with an investor on the West Coast or someone that has more of a global reach. But I don't think it has really impacted or negatively affected our company in any way.
And one of the reasons I think that obviously that comes up a lot. Michael R., you were sharing some of the real estate, et cetera, but I think a lot of it is often there's the perception of there's maybe an ecosystem in terms of hiring, West Coast, et cetera. We have Cornell Technion coming up. It actually has its beta class right now with Google. We've got the high school coming, and with things like the map, we're trying to show that critical mass is there. But Vincent, I'm sort of interested from a perspective of a technologist and someone who's leading a tech team. Engineers is, finding engineers and recruiting great engineers is critical to tech companies in New York City. What has your experience been like? How do you find the people you find? What does that look like?
Well, first, to answer the question you were talking about a second ago, we used to hear a lot of, let's move out to the West Coast, let's see how things are over there. In the last year, 6 months, it has been less and less loud. We've been hearing that. And actually, Palo Alto is a customer of ours, so there's that also. Wow. But the finding development resources here in New York, one incredible luxury we have is that the developers get, if they're not already in New York, they get to come to New York. So even all of the technology aside and everything, living in New York is such an amazing experience that it is really a draw for tech. I'd say a third to a half of our tech team has been pulled in from across the country, and a big part of why that's such an easy thing to do is because of how great the city is.
Yeah. Just add to that, I've definitely seen that happening with Skillshare as well. So we've, say the past 2 engineers that we've hired that haven't even started yet, the big pull was to moving to New York. Some of them in their early to mid 20s, living in Palo Alto is not probably the most fun place to live on the planet.
We had a similar experience actually before we made the decision for sure to move back from Silicon Valley to New York. We were basically about to close on an amazing engineer who we'd been recruiting for a couple months, and we freaked out because we're like, we have to tell him obviously when we give him the offer, which we thought there was a pretty good chance he would take. By the way, we actually just decided we're moving the whole company to New York, and his response was like, that's totally awesome. I'm excited. Can I go? So it worked out. We also just stole someone from Goldman, an engineer as well. So there's some good pickings there too.
That's great. Although we, as the city of New York, support all of our industries and our economy equally. I have to be reminded of that sometimes. But that's great. I mean, we've heard that a lot too, is that obviously there's a difference in quality of life, and there's the ability to experience a city in so many different ways. And I think, of course, that can go in sort of multiple directions. I mean, one is that you don't have everyone who's just 100% only focused on the startup from dusk till dawn and there's no other distractions. But then at the same time, I think we also hear that there's something of sort of a reality check, whether you're talking with your friends about what you do for a living, or you can be a super successful startup founder or CEO in New York City and you're placed next to someone who's a titan of media, fashion, real estate, finance, and you realize it sort of keeps you humble in a certain way. So I think that that's certainly something that we've heard a lot. So another thing I'd love to hear from you about is real estate. So I think you brought that up before, Michael R., about that's one of the reasons people might go on the West Coast. We probably hear, in terms of the major concerns from entrepreneurs in New York City, the number one is talent. How can we find more ways to recruit talent? I mean, that's why we launched the marketing campaign. That's why we're building the Cornell Technion School. Another one that we hear in certain cases is about finding office space and finding real estate. I mean, what have your experiences been like? How can the city further support that and be an advocate for you? Obviously, AppNexus has a ridiculously awesome office, and we're really happy that they're hosting us. I'm curious to hear what everyone else's experience have been like.
While we were growing from 2 to 4 to 8 to 20 people, we made pit stops at one point or another, and I think 9 different shared office spaces. And each of those office spaces was opening satellite shared office spaces elsewhere. So there's been a tremendous boom in that, sort of, I imagine, in sync with the boom in startups that we've seen recently. So that's been very useful to us, but that'll only get you so far. Beyond that, you have to, we had a little bit of trouble finding something in our price range that was exactly the size that we needed, and you always want to buy for where you'll be or lease for where you'll be in 6 months or a year. So that's expensive to do in New York City.
And where are you guys based now?
We're at 29th and 7th Avenue.
Oh, cool.
Nice.
Not so far. I guess anyone else who wants to share what their office space is like and.
So we got our office space a couple of years ago, and we did the same thing. We actually did 2 years in advance. So we split with another company called Supply that got acquired, so they moved out. But I did a poll, and I think after a certain period, I think it's probably 2 to 3 years, everyone moves to Brooklyn. So I did a poll, and I realized that 95% of our company lives in Brooklyn, mostly in Greenpoint or Williamsburg. So one day, we kind of just started looking, and we found out there's absolutely no office space in Brooklyn other than Dumbo. So if there's anything, I noticed that there's no C on NY, so I consider Brooklyn part of New York. So maybe, looking at that as an option. I know Etsy is based out of Dumbo, and Kickstarter bought a building in Greenpoint. And I think with a lot of these tech startups, a lot of their employees will probably live in Brooklyn too. So just expanding there, because obviously there's not a lot of space in New York.
And good point on Made in NY definitely applies to all 5 boroughs. That is really just a stylistic decision that was made when it was launched. And also on the Brooklyn note, I mean, we hear this loud and clear, and we've actually had a few meetings sort of talking about how we can support that, working with the existing zoning, working with the inventory that's there. And the city does have a lot of programs that provide grants for moving to certain areas. It's not going to be for the super hot areas where there's 99% occupancy, like Dumbo, like Flatiron, et cetera. But there are opportunities, and we, for example, the Take the Helm initiative, I don't know if anyone's familiar with that, it gave out several $100,000s worth of grants to startups that moved to different spaces, and some of the people who were part of that were Paperless Post, and now I'm blanking on the other ones, but that's a pretty big one to start with. So Kathryn, I guess, what's your experience been like with real estate and finding a home for your company?
It definitely has been challenging. We are based out of General Assembly right now, which has been great for us. But to some extent, there is this point at which we are just getting too big for any sort of shared space, or at least any sort of co-working type space. That is one area where I have to say, being on listservs for both Y Combinator and then 500 startups who also funded us, it's like every single day somebody's sending out, oh, great office space in Soma in San Francisco, and like costs nothing, and it looks gorgeous, and there's exposed brick everywhere. And so that's one of the things I've had to come to peace with that I may not necessarily get. I think for us, as we've looked around, it's been actually really interesting being able to share with other companies. And we actually benefited from free office space in our very early days, other places that would just let us come in and take a couple desks when we were, broke, starving, ramen-eating founders. And I think that's nice. I think that community really helped get off the ground. And actually, they would then sometimes connect us to people that they knew, that whoever's office we were kind of squatting in that month. But now that we're big enough, we're kind of looking at real estate
That's
ourselves.
good. I mean, I think it's always a challenge, certainly as you're getting started off, and it's something we're looking at really closely. And also to add on, Mike, you had great examples of Dumbo, and how there's Etsy, huge. There's a whole lot of like design firms in Dumbo, more and more in Greenpoint and Williamsburg, as you were saying, but there's not a ton of inventory. And the city's also supporting, there's a lot of inventory in office space in Long Island City, for example, and we're seeing companies like Songza and Shapeways crop up there, and especially as the Cornell Technion School is built out, and we'll see the proximity through the 7 train. It's surprisingly easy to get around, so we're seeing more and more there. So just had to get those in as well. So you mentioned the community of General Assembly. So I'd love to hear, what of your experiences, how has the nature of the community, of the tech community in New York City, played a role, not played a role in what you do as a company? I mean, obviously, I think it's really great that AppNexus built this space here, and that you really use it as a platform to connect the community. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about why you do that, and what's in it for you, and then how everyone else feels about the tech community in New York City.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we built this, office space. This office space is very expensive, right? And even, and so yeah, you might think, why don't we just throw a whole bunch of desks in here and, maximize the usage of it. But I think when we set out to build AppNexus, we set out to build a truly world-class company right here in the heart of New York City. And I think in order to do that, you have to aim really high. You have to create an environment that not only employees feel inspired to work in every day, but also partners and all kinds of other key stakeholders in your whole ecosystem feel really happy to be a part of. And I think that's the opportunity that we have, and the opportunity we're pursuing here with AppNexus is we don't think of ourselves as a startup anymore. We think of ourselves as more of a young company, and one that has aspirations to be a really world-class technology company here. And and I think in order to do that, we built this space and other public spaces, not just to host the community, but also our employees. I mean, getting everybody together, like physically together, and talking about where we're going as a company is something that we do a lot, and something that I think people love about the business. We have a tradition here that we call Razzle Dazzle, as an example. And it's something that started when we were maybe 10 people in a tiny little office down on Broadway, where once a week or so, somebody gets up in front of the company and speaks with passion about something that they're working on that they're really excited about. And every member of the company is in attendance. And it really just helps to make everyone feel like they're part of this, a common cause. And we just felt like as we grew the company, we wanted to maintain that part of our culture. And culture is such a hugely important part of growing a company, and something that we've been really focused on. And so what that means at the scale that we're at is that we need a space like this, where we accommodate 300 people in here. It's wired up for video conferencing, so we can simultaneously speak to everybody in every one of our offices. It's a big investment, but it's also one that we feel great about, and the community has responded. This space is booked pretty much all day, every day, and every evening. sometimes with AppNexus team members and sometimes with members of the extended New York tech community.
That's great. So I'm sure it's great for culture, great for hiring, and great event space is always in short supply in New York City. So I'm not surprised it's in demand. Who else? I mean, so Kathryn, you were talking about how you've been able to grow your company in part from the support of the tech community through space. I mean, how else has that sort of manifested itself for Vincent or Michael? I mean, how have you seen? What do you think is unique about the tech community in New York City? Do you see it as being different from other tech sectors or having a different sort of character or nature from other places you've been? Or is it pretty much sort of like, this is like the generation that's embracing the web? I mean, anything along those lines? Not to put you on the spot.
I mean, I've been here for 6-7 years now, and I would say, one consistent theme that I've noticed over the past 6-7 years is how open and supportive everyone is in the tech community. So I always kind of look at how New York has emerged. I just feel like when I say class, I'm thinking like juniors, freshmen, like seniors. So I feel like in my class, there's a lot of us that were working in other tech startups. We'd go out drinking all the time and hang out and party. And as we started getting a lot busier, those relationships have really lasted over the years. So, for example, I first met Naveen, the co-founder of Foursquare, years ago. We just started this dining club where we just meet with each other on the second Tuesday of every month. I don't think that's today, is it? No. Or is it the third Tuesday? But from talking about companies we're going to start to starting a company, he was a guy I called when we were fundraising, when I had problems with hiring or whatever. And from a personal relationship, that's something I've developed over the past 5 years. And outside of that, just from people that I meet that are always willing to help, take 10, 15 minutes out of their day to give us advice, make introductions, teach a class. I mean, it was really amazing to see the support. So I would say, if I could sum it up, it feels very collaborative versus very competitive. But I think everyone is competitive, but not as cutthroat as other industries.
Something I'd add to that is New York is, as far as I've seen, the most diverse place out there. It's amazing, and I don't just mean people from all around the world. I mean people from all different industries, all different walks of life. Every possible thing you could want to have access to is here. And I'm not saying that other places are all two-dimensional and don't have tremendous amounts of resources, but New York really is best in show for that type of thing. So whatever it is that you want here, it's available, and that's been tremendously helpful for us growing as a startup.
I actually think that the fact that New York isn't the sort of undisputed king of startups is actually a big asset, because I feel like everyone in New York wants New York companies to do well because we all win. I mean, I personally feel happy when I hear a New York company is kicking ass because that makes New York a better place, that draws talent here. It was incredible when we were raising our seed round, and then when we got some pretty serious offers for an A, I literally had other founders send me confidentially their pitch decks, their term sheets, and go through in detail, this is why we made these decisions, this is what they might say, this is why you're going to think about it this way. And it wasn't just one or two people, it was just tremendous numbers of people. And I think the fact that the community is still a little bit smaller gives it this kind of scrappy fighting spirit. And the one other thing I wanted to add to your point about diversity is, which we haven't brought up, but for me has been very kind of personally impactful, is the number of women founders in New York is higher, I think, than almost any other startup community on the planet. There was a survey recently that they looked at a lot of diversity characteristics across London, Rio, all over Silicon Valley, and New York had almost double the number of female founders as a lot of other tech hubs. And it does make a difference to walk into a room and have someone assume that you're probably there as a founder versus you're probably there as someone's girlfriend, which I used to get all the time. And it's great to have role models like Alexa von Tobel from LearnVest, or the founders of Rent the Runway, or Gilt, or Birchbox, to set a model for what it looks like to be a confident, successful woman in the space. And I joke, there's like an underground lady mafia in New York, but it's kind of true. There's a whole bunch of women founders that that also I think have built this really great community in also helping each other navigate sometimes the sticky situations that you get put into being just a minority in any industry.
I think that's a great point, and whether it's diversity in terms of gender or any other sort of metric of diversity, it's something we're really focused on. one of the things I think that's really sort of visible in and sort of apparent in our Made in New York campaign is that it's a really diverse tech sector that we have in New York City, perhaps much more so than other places. Obviously, we have a really long way to go, and I don't in any way want to sort of trivialize that. But I think that it's one of the strengths of New York, and not only that, but I was recently one of the great things about working for the city of New York is you learn so much about different sectors, and I was at a presentation from our awesome immigration affairs commissioner, and 40% of New Yorkers are foreign born, 40% are immigrants, and we, in many ways, we have a strong immigration culture, and that's a very entrepreneurial culture, so we are diverse in so many different ways, gender, ethnicity, country of origin, and obviously this is, we still have a long way to go, but I think that that's exciting to see. And one of our hopes with the campaign, we put it in the subways, we put it in taxis, because our hope is that maybe a young kid going to school would look on the poster and say, oh, hey, that could be me. That I could see myself sort of growing up into that role. Maybe I'll take another math course or science course and hopefully.
Yeah. I would say I was a C++ coder in high school, and I gave it up because I thought the only thing you could do with C++ was build video games or hack the US government. And I didn't want to do either one of those. And it's funny, both of my co-founders code, and all three of us women who coded at various points gave it up, and we look back and think, I do think that if we'd had more role models like we're starting to see now, it may have made a big difference.
That's great. So before we open up to questions, I'd love to just go down and get sort of one thing, and this might be hard to think of right away, but if there's one thing that we can do that sort of Mayor Bloomberg and the Bloomberg administration can do to support entrepreneurs in the near term, what would it be? What's like the one thing that we should be thinking about? Because this is your platform. We're listening, and we're constantly getting really valuable input from all of you. So whatever, whoever wants to jump in, and maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's like just stay out of our way.
Well, I think what you're doing with the Made in New York campaign is huge. Really raising awareness of all the 3,000 tech jobs open in the city of New York. I mean, that is pretty amazing, and I hope the reach is far with that campaign, and that it succeeds in bringing a lot more talent to the city, because I think that's great. But you're doing that already. In terms of stuff you can do in addition to that, I think I would say there's a couple things. So one is, I think it's really good. I see the mayor sometimes supporting companies who are moving offices here, which I think is really good. But I think that it's way better to encourage entrepreneurship here in the city. And so I'd love to see more support for that. But I think that's moving in a great direction. And then I think the other thing is people here have talked about the value of mentorship. And when you ask people about what made Silicon Valley successful, they said that it was really, you had Hewlett Packard, and that was a success story. And then the people from Hewlett Packard went out and mentored other people and helped to create an additional successful company, which led to an additional one. And there's like a direct line between startups that happened in a garage in the 1960s in Palo Alto and really successful Silicon Valley startups that are starting today. And we're going to see the same thing in New York. But I think one thing I'd love to see us get better at is creating that kind of cross-generational mentorship as well. I mean, the mayor himself obviously is the most successful tech entrepreneur in the city. Maybe when he's done with his term, he'll join advisory boards or things like that, I'm not sure. But I think stuff like that would be really helpful. Connecting entrepreneurs and connecting aspiring tech people across the different generations would be cool.
Great, thanks. What do you think, Vincent?
I guess that's me. Well, one thing that I'll say about our experience over the last year and a half, which is where most of our growth happened, is that at every point we were lucky enough to have resources kind of available. Like when we joined an incubator, we were the first class in our particular incubator, and that went really well, and that led to the first round of funding, and then that went really well, and then we had all the developers that we needed, and that went really well, and everything kind of built up. But it's one thing that, of course, you guys are doing very well, but that I think more could be done is sort of setting up that, it's almost a conveyor belt of the growing from a person or two people or three people with an idea and expanding every step. Because a company of two has completely different needs than a company of 4, 8, 15, 20. And shared office space might solve a problem, and then you need a whole building. So one thing that I saw Silicon Valley did very well when they got to that point was that they had this sort of factory, this startup factory going. And I see that happening really well for smaller startups right now. And then after a certain point, they may be providing a little bit more resources to companies that are past that seed round would be useful.
That's great.
And more developers would be great.
Yeah,
If you can fix that.
Yeah, I was going to say ditto to both of those. The other thing that I think, and I've seen some of this already started, but as a company that works with big businesses and giant brands from McKinsey to Gucci to Tumblr to Hire, I think that there's any way that that startups can get connected with the people at those big companies that are really interested in innovation, I think is a win-win for both. Because I do talk to a number of people who work at big brands, and they say, like, I'm sure you hear this even more than I do, we're looking to see what's out there. We want to kind of understand who's innovating in areas that are going to change our multi-billion-dollar business. And I think any way that you could provide pathways for those companies to connect with startups outside of some of the ad hoc stuff that's going on, I think is very, very powerful, because ideally, if the interests are overaligned, then everybody wins. And I think that makes one of the things that for me has been really strong about New York kind of even more of a bonus.
That's great. We do hear that a lot, and it's something that we're looking at doing even more of. So Michael?
Going last on this question means there's not a lot of answers left. So ditto to everything they said. I mean, the thought that kind of went through my head was keep doing what you're doing. I think the city's doing an amazing job. I think raising awareness for tech startups in New York is great. Every time I'm walking down the street, I'll see the bus ad, and then the Jay-Z song comes on. I'm like, oh, yeah, that's awesome. It comes on my head. But I think just keep a very long-term view on how they want to build an ecosystem. So, not just 1 or 3 or 5 years, but what does it look like in 10 or 20, so that it could be one of the best tech startup hubs in the world. It's not going to happen overnight.
Right. I think that's great. So quick recap. We have a new gig for the mayor when he's done. Expand the campaign. Startup factory / more developers. Meet and greet for cross silos and cross sectors, and take the long view. And I am happy to say we have progress on one of these already, which is the expanding the campaign. So we haven't announced this yet, so we'll announce it tonight, which is that we've expanded the Made in New York campaign. We have placements now through the end of the year. We know it's sort of late in the game, but we thought better late than never, at the top 10 engineering schools in the country, to make it really clear to them that there are jobs in New York City, that we are hiring, and that if they're thinking about what they should do, they should come here. Because we hear from a lot of tech folks, I didn't even know this was an option. So we're trying to do that. I think all of your other recommendations are really fantastic. So I think we have a few minutes for questions.
Hi. My name's Alana. I'm from AppNexus, and I'd love to hear just from the panel in general, kind of how you see the perception, or the perception from outside the tech community changing as kind of this tech startup, booms in New York. I think people think of New York as having, they see finance as kind of the money-making industry, and people shifting that way. How do you see the perception kind of changing from the broader community as we do things like the Made in New York campaign?
So shifting perceptions of New York City from finance to tech hub.
I think one of the challenges that we have, obviously, is getting away from that. But New York is getting away from sort of being pigeonholed into one particular industry. But we have the advantage, I think, of also having a tremendous film industry and having a tremendous other fashion industry and media and everything. So I think one of the things we have to do is kind of use that as a springboard and say, like, yes, there's a lot of banking going on here and there's a lot of finance going on here, but that's one of the reasons there's so much venture capital here. And it all kind of ties in, and using it as an advantage rather than a stereotype that we have to overcome.
Cool. Oh, Kathryn, do you want to respond?
Actually, the last thing is that I think that there used to be a perception that Silicon Valley was about the big ideas and New York was about the money. And one of the things I think we actually see after every downturn is that there's a renewed focus on startups that make money, actually kind of a positive thing. So I think that that's been a positive trend for New York overall.
Great, thanks. Another question?
Hi, I'm Ruthie. I just wanted to ask you about, there's a lot of really exciting things happening in civic tech and open data, and there's a lot of exciting things happening in for-profit tech companies. And I was just wondering, whether you've seen some intersection between the two, and I just want to learn more about that.
It's probably a question for Vincent.
Yeah, we are a for-profit civic technology company, so I guess that applies to us. Yeah, it's been amazing. This is what civic hackers are doing. Open data has really been amazing. We've seen the White House Open Data Initiative has really been great. And that's actually something that PublicStuff is really trying to work on, is we're trying to become a platform for all of these developers, from small individual people in coffee shops all the way up to huge companies. Our product allows people, not to plug or anything, our product allows people to provide software to governments using our technology in a really quick, simple, easy way. And the more citizens are using these tools, the more cities will learn that it's incredibly useful and effective to get information from citizens and to give information back. One of the first things that we always have to deal with when we're talking to people about public stuff, some people say, well, cities don't want to hear more about this or the potholes or problems, but really that's as far from the truth as it possibly could be. And the cities, we just need to show them that not all cities can be as cutting edge as New York is as far as technology goes.
And I would just bolster that civic tech companies and civic-minded tech companies in general have been so huge to New York City. A couple examples from Hurricane Sandy. Twitter donated about $5,000 worth of promoted tweets and helped us to reach hundreds of thousands more people through Twitter with updates about the storm. And Google helped us to build an interactive hurricane map that helped people find out if they were in an evacuation zone, and probably helped us to reach at least 5 times as many people. I mean, probably over 1 million additional viewers that way. So everyone's sort of helping us to do our job. And we actually launched something called Code Corps in the mold of like a Peace Corps, AmeriCorps, that's basically sort of a National Guard for techies in response to all the great help that we get. So,
Cool.
another
Thanks.
question? Thanks.
Hi, I'm Hetty. So I wanted to ask, first of all, I'm really inspired by this panel. It came at a great time for me. About a month ago, my boss asked me to relocate to California, and I have turned him down. So I really am excited about this New York tech scene, and I really want to be a part of it. Which brings me to my question is, how did you guys get to the place you are within the New York tech scene? Obviously, there's these types of events, but how do you really work the network here? How did you guys find that you were able to do that?
Well, I'm from Canada, I'm from Toronto, and I was part of a company that we sold to a business here in New York called DoubleClick, which was the early leader in the digital advertising space. And over a period of several years, worked at DoubleClick, became an executive at the company, and then ultimately we sold that to Google, and I worked there too. And so over a 10-year period, I just met and got to know the New York digital technology and advertising community really well. And that kind of gets back to what I was saying a little bit about the Silicon Valley thing. Like, there is a direct line between DoubleClick, which at one point was a small internet startup here, and even this company, because actually the founder of Right Media, which was the company that Brian helped us start and sell to Yahoo, was originally founded by someone from DoubleClick too. So it's like a tree with different branches. And so I think honestly, it's just for me about getting involved in one sector of the space that you care about and are passionate about. And my general viewpoint is that has led people that I've known and worked with over the years to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And so I think it's really just about like getting started in one segment of the space that you're excited about, and ultimately it leads to many other things. So
I had a bit of a different path in that about 2 years ago, I didn't know a single person in tech. I was an ex-McKinsey management consultant who'd moved to Rwanda to do global health and vaccines work. And so I got back to the US in September of 2010, and literally knew no one in tech, but decided I wanted to start a business with a couple of former McKinsey colleagues. And so I went to my first event. It was like a Techstars open house. Literally didn't know a single person, just talked to a bunch of people. A few people were like, oh, you should meet so-and-so, you should meet so-and-so. And so for the first couple months, I just went to about one event a week. And then when people would introduce me to others, I would follow up and get coffee. And for me, South by Southwest, I guess in March of the following year, was a big game changer, because suddenly it went from being kind of casually acquaintances with a few people to going to this conference and really cementing those relationships. And so that's when I felt like I first had a community of peers that I was very close to in technology. And I started the Daily Muse probably 4 months after that. And we realized very quickly we had to find investors. Nobody wanted to fund us. Our early idea was turned down by almost every single investor. And so I realized while we were working on the idea and the proof that I also just needed to find more investors. And so I won't necessarily recommend this, but for a period of about 3 months, I went to 2 to 3 tech events a night, every single night, from Monday to Thursday. And my co-founders can attest to this. I would go to one at 6 p.m., usually go to another at 7:30, and if I had time, I'd stop by another at the end. And it served a couple purposes. One, I didn't have money for dinner, so I got to eat all these appetizers, which was fantastic. But also, I went from knowing a small number of people to probably pitching 150 investors that I had personally met or been introduced to, and knowing, I think, the large number of founders, marketers, developers, other people, reporters in the space. And those 3 months have paid dividends for the rest of my time in tech.
Great, and you're probably taking the first step, person behind the beam, by being here tonight, so thanks. Great, I think we have time for one more question.
Yeah. I'll start by saying that garages are out, but co-working space and kitchen tables are in. And if you can afford a garage in this town, you can certainly afford to finance your own startup. So, so I think that the idea of starting from a garage in this town is kind of ridiculous. The second thing is, I think Silicon Valley owes a lot of its success to some very talented non-technical people. And I'm pretty sure that you in this town are learning the same lesson. My question to you is, what kind of non-technical people are you looking that you want so bad that you snatch them off right off the sidewalk? I'm asking that question as a hardcore technical guy, by the way.
Sorry, so was the question what kind of non-technical people are you looking for your startups?
That you're looking that you want so bad that you'll snatch them off the sidewalk.
That you want, yeah. Obviously, you know the answer, Michael.
I mean, I don't think it's just tech startups. I think it's just any business. You're looking for the A players, the people that just are very skilled and awesome at their job that could work in a great team. You could see that in basketball teams like the Miami Heat, to companies like AppNexus, to pretty much anything. And I think New York attracts a very certain type of person, whether they're specializing in as an engineer or marketing or PR. I mean, it really doesn't matter. I think New York does attract the best people in the world here. So that's, to answer your question, yeah, we would love to snatch those people off the street if they're walking down it.
Great. Well, I think that we now have a wonderful reception waiting for us, so please join me in thanking our wonderful hosts and our awesome panelists. Thank you all for being here, and again, you can find out more information about all the city programs that are out there and all the awesome Made in New York tech companies at wearemadeinny.com.